Hey yo, what's good reader fam? Welcome back to my channel. Hope the fam is good. Hope you've been loving your books lately. Hope you're keeping those bookshelves of yours clean, dust free, and I hope you've been killing the reading game lately. Today I'm bringing you another episode of my Books I've Read Recently series, except for today's video is going to be more so of a books I've read not so recently. I'm just really behind on sharing my thoughts on some of these books. I've got 7 bookarunos I'm going to be talking about today, so without further ado, let's get this book party started. First up here I have Becoming by Michelle Obama. Every time I hear her name, I just can't help but think of Boss by Fifth Harmony. Michelle Obama. Purse so heavy getting Oprah dollars. Hey! This is a memoir detailing the life of Michelle Obama. We start from her childhood and work our way up to adulthood. From her life in Chicago to her career to being a mother and serving as the First Lady in the White House. It chronicles her life and reveals how she became who she is today. Pros. Number 1, this book is super personable. It's like you're sitting down with Michelle Obama and you're having like a conversation with her, a one-sided conversation with her because you're really too intimidated to talk at all. Because you're in the presence of a queen and she's telling you all these stories about her life. And you start to feel like BFFs, but then the realization sinks in at the fact that you're just reading a book about Michelle Obama and you're not actually like talking to her. So, yeah. Number 2 is that you learn so much in this book. It's like she's taking this veil of perception that you might have had about her and her family and taking it down so you can truly see what went on behind the scenes in the White House and how they handled different situations that they faced. It was a good and interesting look at how things were behind the scenes. Number 3, and my last point, is that you'll feel challenged by this book. This book was super inspirational, and just hearing everything that Michelle Obama has done throughout her life, not only her time spent in the White House, but all these things in her life, from her school life to her career to being a mother, all these things were super inspiring. Hearing about them, hearing about all the hard work that she's put into different things within her life. So reading about all these things, I personally felt challenged to work harder. Cons. My first con is that I felt like sometimes I was just reading a timeline. This happened, then this happened, then this happened, and that happened, and that happened. And if we're being honest here, which is always my policy, honesty is hottest, I feel like she could have written a book for each year they were in the White House, and I would have loved that so much more. I know you can't necessarily tell every little thing that happens behind the scenes, I get that, but I can guarantee you that she has enough stories from each year they were in the White House, enough for each year to fill up a book. Because like I said, at times it really just felt like she was saying, this happened, then this happened, we did this, we did that. I just wanted my friend here to expand on some things. My last point is that I just felt like this book's theme of becoming kind of got lost throughout the book. I'm gonna struggle to explain this, but bear with me. But I wanted to see how the things that she had gone through growing up kind of really came through and shaped her and made her into the person that she was. I just felt like she was telling these stories and not like tying it in to telling you how it shaped her into who she was. Does that make any sense? But I also see the argument that she didn't really like need to tie in those things that happened in the end, because you should just see that naturally in who she is and the way that she acts and everything. So I don't know, that kind of is just like a personal preference. I kind of wanted to see how those things came into play later on in life, how her growing up affected who she became. But I think this is me just being picky. I gave Becoming a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read not so recently is The Night Tiger by Yang Shi Chu. I'm gonna have a hard time explaining this book, so bear with me. First up, we follow Ji Lin, who is working as a dressmaker's apprentice, but on the side, she is also a dance hall girl. She's working the side job to actually help her mom pay off her debt, but she's gotta keep it hush-hush, or else her stepdaddy's gonna be pissed. One night, she gets her hands on something really disturbing from one of her dance partners, that being a freaking finger in a jar. I'd personally be chucking that in the trash, but no, she's like, a finger? I must replace it to its rightful owner. In doing that, she finds herself in a wild excursion. Excursion. Why does that word sound weird? Excursion. Anyway, excursion. Yeehaw! He let out a yeehaw he didn't realize he was holding. Then we follow the character of Ren, who is actually trying to track down a finger, that being the finger of the doctor that he worked for, but the doctor passed away. It was the doctor's dying wish for Ren to find his finger and to bury him with it. And if Ren does not complete this within 49 days, then the doctor will wander the earth forever as a ghost. Both of the stories end up coming together in this crazy, magical, dark adventure. Pros. Number 1, this one was super interesting to me in the fact that you learn so much about Malaysian culture, specifically in like the early 1900s throughout this book. And it wasn't just like, this is the backdrop for the novel, but I'm not gonna give you any details. It was more like, look how atmospheric and detailed this book is. It transports you from sitting in your bed reading to feeling like you're an observer on the streets watching everything go down. Talk about a suck you in kind of reading experience. Number 2, I loved the magical aspect that came into play. It was a full course meal that I came fully prepared to eat right up, and that's just what I did. I was craving a mild fantasy just like this one, and it did the dang thing. It hit the spot, my taste buds were satisfied. Number 3 is that I like that it brought in a bit of Chinese folklore. I was living for it. I don't think I've ever read a book where there's Chinese folklore. I might have and just not have realized it, but it was excelente. I think it was like one of my favorite parts of this book, honestly. Cons. My only con with this book is that I didn't like the relationship. It was a no-go for me. See, it's not only in YA books where I'm iffy with the relationships, it's the case for adult books too. It's a romance where I personally was easily able to predict it, but I also didn't want it to happen. I was like, I really hope I'm wrong. Mostly because I find the circumstance of it all a little uncomfortable, but also I really did not like the dude. He was possessive and had the mindset of it's my way or the highway, and I'm just not on board with that way of thinking. I gave The Night Tiger a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Next up, I have here Bloodleaf by Krystal Smith. I didn't know while reading Bloodleaf that it's actually a retelling, but it is, now I know, and if you didn't know before, then now you know, but if you did know before, then you did know. I didn't know, but now I know, so that's great. We're all in the know now. It's a retelling of The Goose Girl. We follow Princess Irelia, who after being accused of being a witch, must flee her kingdom. Later, all you haters trying to kill me, I'm done with you. Nobody wants her around, so it's a good reason to say bye. She ends up in a place that gives her the opportunity to escape her past life, work on her magic skills, pew pew, and form new relationships. But it doesn't take long for her past to catch up with her and haunt her. Pros. Number 1, I loved the main character and I was rooting for her. Let's go, Princess Irelia. I wanted her to kick all the haters in the butt. Give them a full-on butt kicking, Princess Irelia. Everything she was having to endure was just absurd. Like, imagine your whole kingdom hating you, wanting nothing to do with you, wanting to get rid of you, wanting to kill you off. No good at all. Yeah, I would not be wanting to stay in that kingdom. I'd be getting the heck out of there, just like Princess Irelia did. Number 2 is that I feel like we see some quality growth within the characters. The author came around with the watering can and watered the seeds that she had planted throughout this story, which is something that I find really important, especially if your characters are going to go through some hardships, are going to face a lot of stuff that like really challenges them. I'm going to need to see them change in some kind of way. It doesn't have to be like this huge drastic change. That's not what I'm looking for, but I'm looking for some growth, looking for them to like learn some things in the process. If you're going to put your characters in a storm, they're not going to stay the same. They're going to end up wet. They're going to be drenched from head to toe. And it was nice to see these characters go from dry to wet to dry again. That was a really weird analogy. Hopefully you get what I meant by that. I just had the worst time wrangling that one in. Number 3 is that I really like how this book was kind of built on some twists and turns. We didn't have the most solid foundation, so we had some nice shock factor come into play. Cons. Number 1, my first gripe with this book is that it just wasn't the most original when it came to the world and the magic system. I do feel like the author was able to kind of implement some new and interesting things. It wasn't like a straight up rip-off of another book, thank the heavens. Never want that borderline plagiarism that we've seen authors do in the past. I'm getting off topic here. Number 2 is that I also wish that the world would have been kind of built up in a more seamless way. It just felt like it was dropped in our laps. Not that it was that complicated of a world to understand. It's not rocket science, Jesse. Noted. But I'm also really picky with world building and how it's delivered. Next up here I have White Rose by Kip Wilson. This is a historical fiction book and we follow our main character Sophie Skoll, who was a German college student who challenged the Nazis during World War II, and she did so as a part of the White Rose nonviolent resistance group. This book is based on a true story and is written in verse. Pros. Number 1, I love the main character. She was super passionate about making things happen and fighting for what she believes in, despite the fact that she knew that it was going to lead her into troubled waters. She kept putting up a fight. And she's really focused on the mission ahead of her. She doesn't allow herself to stray off the path that's before her. Number 2, while this is historical fiction and it's not completely accurate, it is based on a true story, and it was cool learning more about something that I had maybe been heard mentioned before, but didn't know much about. Number 3, my last point is that I liked the realness factor with this book. Obviously it is historical fiction based on a true story, so that probably did help it, but not only in the tone and the feeling of the book, but also just how everything came to a close. I high-key got teary-eyed at the end. I did not cry, I just had like a layer of wetness over my eyeball. It wasn't a full-on waterfall situation, just a layer of wetness. That's all, folks. Cons. Number 1, I did not like the format of this book at all, and not in the fact that it was written in verse. I'm fine with books written in verse. What didn't work is that the timeline kind of jumps around, pew, 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 and that just kept losing me. It completely disrupted the flow of the story, and I do get why it was being used. I feel like the author was using it in a way to kind of bring in a surprising element to the story, but I could have done without it. Number 2, while I didn't mind the verse first format, I actually kind of liked it. I also didn't really see the purpose for the story being written in that way. I didn't really feel like it elevated the story in any way. I think I'm being picky, so just call me Picky the Reader. Number 3, while I did love the main character, I noticed that there was a very "I'm not like other girls" line. It wasn't specifically "I'm not like other girls," but it like alluded to the fact of her being like, "I'm not like the rest of the girls." And that really bothered me. It's 2019, let's drop that line. I gave White Rose a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Next up here I have Flying Lessons and Other Stories by a bunch of different authors. This is a middle grade anthology with a focus on diverse stories. Pros. My first pro is just what I like about anthologies in general, and that's the fact that it's a great way to be exposed to new authors. It's like getting an appetizer for what an author can bring to the table. I would say that it's not always the best way to sample an author's work because obviously short stories are different than full-fledged novels, but it can kind of give you an idea as to what their writing style is like. Number 2, I love the overall mission of this book. Diverse stories are incredibly important. Each story provides a diverse perspective, and even though it's 2019, we still have a long way to go in making things more inclusive, and this is coming from the whitest white boy who is whiter than white bread. Number 3, I'm just gonna point out some of my favorite stories in this. The Difficult Path by Grace Lynn, amazing. Main Street by Jacqueline Woodson. We love us some Jacqueline Woodson on this channel. She's amazing. That story was great. And Sometimes a Dream Needs a Push by Walter Dean Myers. That one was great. Cons. My one con for this book is kind of stupid, but I'm gonna mention it anyways because it's something that bothered me. There were 2 stories in here that were so long compared to the other stories, and for some reason it just really bothered me. And I think the big reason why it did bother me was the fact that I wasn't enjoying those long stories. There were other stories that I would have preferred be longer, and those long stories I wanted to be a lot shorter. So I know that's a stupid complaint, but it really bothered me about this book. I gave Flying Lessons and Other Stories a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Next up here I have Restore Me by Tahara Mafi. This follows the aftermath of book 3 and follows our main character Juliet, who has the ability to shock people. She's got a lethal touch. The most vague description ever, but it is the 4th book in a series, so I can't say much. Pros. Number 1, I love these characters so flipping much, which is why I keep coming back to these books. Kinji needs his own series, and I will not stop saying that until it happens, and it'll probably never happen, so you'll be hearing this from me for a while, folks. Number 2, it's just super entertaining. I enjoyed it just for what it was. If you go in with that mindset, you'll enjoy this book, but if you go in expecting it to change your life forever, to be the best book ever, expecting it to knock you off your feet, you're gonna be disappointed. Number 3, I loved the ending because it had me hooting and hollering. I love an ending that has me reacting like a madman, and that's exactly what happened here. It went to a place that I did not foresee, and it has me questioning everything. This book definitely felt like a big shift for the series. It looks like it's gonna take the story in a completely different place than any of us expected it to go in, and that has me stoked. Cons. The first thing is that I felt like I left this book with more questions than answers, which I think is okay, but I would have liked to have had some satisfaction in having some of my questions answered, because I just kind of left it being like, great, I'm gonna have to read a whole another book just to get some questions answered. So I feel like I would have left this book a little bit more satisfied had I had some of my questions answered. But I digress. Number 2 is that this book definitely just felt like a bridge book. I know that books like this are pretty necessary in series. You gotta lay the foundation down to build the structure, but I feel like there's a way to have it be a bridge book and not feel like a bridge book, if that makes any sense. So I don't know if I'm being like the pickiest person in the world right now, but I feel like this book could have used some work. That's all I'm saying about that. Number 3, and this one I don't know how to say in a very respectful way. I'm gonna try my best, but I feel like this book was kind of missing a bit of a plot. I don't know if I'm the only one that thinks that, which I do think this goes back to like it being a book where it's setting groundwork for what's to come, but really I just felt like not a lot happens in this book. I mean, the ending, a lot happens, but up until that point it's like, okay, what we doing here? Did anybody else feel that way? I gave Restore Me a 2.5 out of 5 stars. I still enjoyed it. It was still fun. Just didn't love it. Lastly, I have here To Best the Boys by Mary Weber. I feel like I've talked about this book so much recently, so I'm gonna try to say the description all in one go without breathing. Here we go. Every year there's this competition held in a labyrinth where these boys are the only ones that are allowed to enter, and the winner gets a scholarship to college. We follow our main character Rin, whose mom has a disease, and the one thing that she wants is to go to college and get a degree. Oh dang it, I ran out of breath. I was trying to do it all in one breath. She wants to go to college to become a scientist in order to kind of find a cure for this disease that her mom has. So what does she do? She disguises herself as a boy and enters the competition. The rest is history, and it's wild. I just realized that Michelle Obama has been chilling back here. I meant to put each of the books up here as I was going through the description descriptions. Oops! Oh well, Michelle Obama makes this background better. Pros. Number 1, I loved how much you got to know each and every one of the characters. I felt like the characters were definitely like the strongest aspect of this book. You really get to know each and every character. Each side character is very important to the story. I'm always not a big fan when the side characters are just there and they don't serve any purpose or you don't really get to know them, but that didn't happen in this book. Each character was completely fleshed out. Number 2 is the discussions that this book brings up. I was not expecting this book to be as political as it was, but I loved it. I was here for it. The politics brings in a lot of interesting discussions, and then we have kind of the underlying discussion of sexism throughout this book. And while it was unexpected, because I thought going into this book that we were just gonna have a party in the labyrinth, I really enjoyed that aspect. Number 3, lastly, I just really enjoyed the labyrinth portion. It was a wild time full of really interesting challenges. It felt like the Maze Runner meets the Hunger Games meets Goblet of Fire. I feel like it had elements from all of those stories, but it brought in its own twist, and I really liked that. I also liked that everything wasn't super convenient, because that's something that I was kind of worried about going in. I was like, I really hope that they're actually challenged and that they actually go through some hardships. Thankfully, it wasn't convenient, and they had to work hard to untangle all these messes that they found themselves in. Cons. The one and only con that I had with this book is that I just wanted to spend more time in the labyrinth. I felt like it could have been so much longer, and I would have been okay with that because I loved the time that we did spend in the labyrinth, and I just wanted it to be expanded on. I just wanted more, but other than that, it was great. I gave To Best the Boys a 4 out of 5 stars. So these are some books that I read not so recently. You guys should let me know down below in the comments if you have read any of these books and what you thought of them. I'd love to hear from you. Or if you haven't read any of these, let me know down below in the comments a book that you've read recently and loved. Let me know in the comments down below. If you like this video, be sure to go and hit that like button. If you want to see more bookish content from me, be sure to go and hit subscribe or go and hit that bell icon and you'll be notified every time I post new videos. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope your day is bright and that tomorrow is brighter. Keep reading what your heart desires, and I will see you soon with a new video. Bye!